The states of New York and Florida are polar opposites when it comes to how they treat landlords and real estate developers. And I'm going to tell you the exact differences there are between a state that is pro tenant and pro landlord. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's an opinion piece from a politician up in New York State, specifically in New York City. Now, this person, I believe he's a city council member for New York City's city council, and he has looked at the differences between the development and the real estate just overall in Florida and New York. And he says, hey, New York is getting their butts handed to them by a state that treats landlords and real estate developers not like they're criminals, but with respect, like they're actually the ones who are going to help solve the problem of, there not being enough housing, okay? And that's the way it should be all throughout the country. So when I talk about New York and Florida here in this article, I'm talking about states throughout the entire country. It could be California, it could be Washington State, it could be Oregon, it could be, Massachusetts. But these are places where they villainize landlords, they villainize real estate developers, they pass ridiculous legislation, things that hurt us and make it more difficult for us to build and provide housing. And then, they wonder, well, where's the new housing? Why is no one building any new housing? Why is housing so expensive here? Well, it's the laws and policies that you passed. And if you look at other states, such as Florida, such as Texas, such as states in the Midwest where I invest, you see the exact opposite. Okay, the politicians are lining up to help us out, to help make it easier for us to operate. And that's what they should be doing throughout the entire country, okay? But no, it just doesn't work that way. That's why I say, if you are investing in these states, or if you want to get started investing in these states, you might want to consider looking elsewhere where you're going to get treated better, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think. What do you think is the biggest difference between investing in a place that is very anti-landlord, New York, and a place that is very pro-landlord and pro-real estate development like Florida? It's obvious to me that policies such as rent control and extremely strong eviction protections are the biggest thing. But there's other issues such as the extremely high tax rate in a lot of the more progressive anti-landlord states. So anyway, let's get into this article. This article is coming from the NewYorkPost.com, and it says, Florida's solving its real estate crunch. New York should pay attention. And this is an opinion piece by a person named Joe Borelli. And it says down here at the end of the article that Joe Borelli is a minority leader of the New York City Council. So, obviously the majority of the politicians in New York are Democrats. So I'm assuming this gentleman is a Republican. So anyway, let's get into the article and see what it says. I visited friends in Florida last month and, like most New Yorkers, spent some time salivating over the prospect of owning some Boca bungalow or Sarasota semi. But as you may have anticipated, therein lies the crux of Florida's real estate crunch. Too many folks, like me, and not enough housing units. I may have temporarily left New York, but the housing problem at the heart of our state budget impasse were firmly in tow. A budget of polling data confirms housing affordability is the number one issue for residents of both states. The allure of Florida is easy to quantify. Half the tax burden, low cost of living. Free state mentality, nice weather. But a big downside to all this appeal is the state's growing workforce can no longer afford to live in the popular urban areas where they work. Sound familiar? So, yeah, he goes over, basically Florida is suffering from the same problem that New York is going through right now, where they have a housing affordability issue. But how Florida responds to that issue is completely the opposite of how New York responds to it. So Florida is actually looking at the root cause of the affordability issue, which is there is a shortage of supply and there is extremely strong demand. Okay, this is what we talk about on all the time on my videos. Okay, basically the reason the housing is so expensive is because there is not enough supply, and that the real way to solve that problem is by building more supply, which is what they're trying to do in Florida. But in a place like New York, they're trying to use government price controls to keep pricing, to keep housing less expensive. And as we all know, that causes the exact opposite problem. Okay, so anyway, let me continue. The similarities between the housing crisis in New York and Florida in there, however, our states' respective approaches to solving it could not contrast more. One state builds more housing, the other issues press releases touting how it one day, maybe, sorta, hopefully, will build more housing. While there, I had an opportunity to hear Governor Ron DeSantis speak about how his administration is addressing the issue. His plan, the Live Local Act, is pretty straightforward. The bill provides more than $700 million in grants, incentives, and loans to developers, home buyers, and local governments, about double the previous year's outlays. Unlike New York, this plan is not tied to and specifically bans the kind of rent control laws that stifle growth and investment. So yeah, in Florida, they pass $700 million of loans and grants, etc., to developers to help them build more housing. Okay, because that's what they want. They want more housing to be built so that the prices are lower. The more housing there is, the lower the pricing will be for the people who need it. Okay, and they said specifically, we are not going to tie rent control to this. It's banned. We do not want rent control here in the state of Florida. This is just genius, because rent control does, like I said, it has the opposite effect. It will cause housing to be more expensive, and it will make it so that developers don't even want to build. Okay. Why would a developer want to have limited rents on a property that they're building? That doesn't make any sense. The government puts price controls in place, and that causes developers not to want to build. It's pretty simple. We see this every single place that rent control is implemented. And, New York it basically proves the point. And they have some interesting facts further down, but let me continue again. Another key distinction, unlike New York, this plan focuses on home ownership and middle class wealth preservation through low interest loans for down payment. Unlike New York, this plan passed in the legislature with little controversy and overwhelming bipartisan support. Another key distinction between DeSantis and Governor Kathy Hochul's plans is that while both supersede some local zoning laws, the Live Local Act targets underused commercial and industrial properties inside the dense urban core where housing is needed. Albany has set its sights on rezoning the burbs. So basically, the plan in Florida, what they want to do is they want to, supersede some of the local zoning laws and allow developers to build housing for people to live in underutilized industrial and commercial sites, right? So this will put new housing in the urban core, close to where the jobs are located, and in places that are less controversial to build in. Meanwhile, in New York, they're trying to force suburbs to build, a whole bunch of low-income housing in places where they don't want it, okay? Bedroom communities of all single-family houses, they want to, just shove in a whole bunch of high-density residential, and the people are like, hey, we don't want that here. We don't want that here. And, the state is not listening to them. So that is why there is so much opposition to the plan up in New York versus what's going on in Florida. You're not going to have a lot of opposition when you're developing a industrial site over into housing. People, they won't mind the industrial site being gone. Okay. I mean, it's pretty obvious that's a much, much better plan. The other thing they said is that they are, providing low interest loans for down payments for people, right? And that could help people who aren't able to afford the more expensive housing because prices have gone up so much. They might be able to buy a home now. It's quite difficult if you're in an area like Miami and the average price of a new home is $500,000. Well, to come up with even 10% down, that's 50 grand. To come up with 5% down is 25 grand. And that is a huge, huge thing to overcome. Now, I do personally believe that you should save up for your down payment, right? But I don't mind as much, the fact that they are trying to help people get the money so that they can have these homes, okay? While Florida wants to eliminate commuting hours and auto traffic by bringing the workforce downtown, our governor wants to send low income workers to Mount Kisco and Lake Ronkonkoma, charge them for the privilege of congesting the roads on their way to work, and rob them of countless hours of commutes. Another key difference is tax incentives. In New York, any tax incentive like 421A is treated like a hot potato wrapped in poison. In Florida, tax incentives just build more housing. Unsurprisingly, DeSantis is cheered around his state while Hochul faces a suburban uprising across hers. So yeah, in New York, they think that anytime that you give tax incentives to large developers, you're stealing money away from the people. That's literally. I mean, I've covered article after article after article about this very issue here, right? But in Florida, they see tax incentives as actually helping make progress. And so the different ways that they look at these tax incentives means that in Florida, they will push these tax incentives onto the developers, and the developers will build. They will be incentivized to build, and there will be no arguing about it, no problems whatsoever. While in New York, it is kind of the opposite. So, I think the proof is in the pudding right now. I believe, I mean, it was a while back where Florida actually passed New York State in terms of the overall state population. And the growth rate in Florida is huge. I mean, compared to New York, I believe the population in New York State is actually declining. And if it's not declining, it's very, very much slower than it is in Florida. So, it's obvious to me that a lot of people are headed to Florida, and it's not just for the weather. Okay, it's never just about the weather. It comes down to policies. It comes down to taxes. It comes down to too much bureaucracy and government control over everything. And people, they want their freedom back. They want to be able to go somewhere and actually afford to live there. So for a person who is originally from New York City, right, $500,000 for a house might be cheap. I mean, when you're considering that if you buy a house in Queens, it could cost you $1,000,000. I mean, by comparison, you're saving half, But for a person like me, yeah, spending $500,000 on a house is a lot. But I'm coming from Nebraska, so this is a lot cheaper than living in South Florida. But there's always northern Florida too. It's not like the entire state is Miami. I could go up to Orlando, I could go up to Jacksonville, I could go up to Tampa and have a lot more affordable housing in those areas than I could down in South Florida. So, obviously Florida is a big state and you still get all of the tax benefits. You get a lot of the benefits of the weather, and even you face less problems from hurricanes the further north you are in the state. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who want to move there right now, and it is a great place to live in my opinion. And part of that is because the mentality there is more based on, hey, we want to do whatever is possible to allow people to live their lives and be free. And the policies up in New York seem to be saying, well, we believe in socialism. We believe that it's not fair that some people are rich and some people aren't, that some people are able to afford housing and some people aren't. And we are going to rob Peter to pay Paul. And, I just do not agree with that.